Hey guys, we're Ali and Gary with Roll With Us DMs, professional game masters with over 17 years of experience that also love to go on some side quests with our friends, which you can see here on our channel.
Thank you for checking out our videos. If you haven't already, you should quest down to the subscription button and strike the notification bell so you never miss our content.
Our links are in the description below.
Consider becoming a channel member to access epic perks, including playing in one of our games. Now, on with the video! Hi there, and welcome to Refocus. Today, I am recovering my focus point on spellcasting in DC20 versus spellcasting in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So, join me as we recover that focus point and get ready to tackle the next encounter of the day. So, the first thing that I wanted to look at is Firebolt in DC20, and then we'll look at the 5th edition equivalent, and then we'll take a look at Bless in DC20, and then Bless in 5th edition. I wanted to take these two spells specifically because they are iconic, and also, on one hand, Firebolt is an attack spell, and Bless is a buff spell. So we can see how both systems handle attacking and also buffing. So as we look at the Firebolt here from DC20, it is a destruction school cantrip, meaning that it doesn't cost any magic points to innately cast it, meaning that you can cast it at will as often as you would like. The cost to cast it is 1 action point. Again, in DC20 you have 4 action points, so you could cast Firebolt 4 times in a turn, but each time you cast it you would be making a spell check, and each of those spell checks would gain stacking disadvantage. So it's just noteworthy that while you can cast it 4 times, unlike in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, most likely you're not going to want to. In fact, as we get deeper into the spell, you'll see that you probably want to spend the extra actions on enhancing your Firebolt rather than casting it multiple times. The range is 10 spaces. DC20 uses spaces instead of feet. Each space is 5 feet, so essentially it's a 50-foot range, which is pretty good. And the duration is instant, meaning that it happens instantaneously. What it does, you can produce one of the following effects. Spell attack, you make a spell check, which is going to be a 20-sided die plus 4, usually at level 1, against the physical defense, or in 5th edition terms, the armor class, of a target within range. On a hit, the target takes 2 fire damage. You can also make a fire orb. Flickering flames appear in your hand. The flames can remain there for 10 minutes and harms neither you or your equipment. The flame sheds bright light in a 5-space radius. The spell ends early if you dismiss it for free, if you cast it again, or if you spend an action point to make a spell attack with it. So the cool thing here is you get a little bit of flexibility out of this one spell, where normally it is just an attack in 5th edition. You can also pretty much create light with it. And then later when you want to, you can make that spell attack. There is a cantrip passive, just like weapons in DC20 have passive effects. This cantrip will deal +1 damage against creatures that are burning. How do you get creatures burning, you might ask? Well, if you look at the action point enhancements, for 1 action point you can deal +1 fire damage. For 1 action point you can increase the range by 5 spaces, and for 1 action point you can add the burning condition. The target makes a physical save. That's going to be their best out of athletics or acrobatics. Failure, they begin to start burning, which is that they will take 1 point of fire damage during their turn, and a creature burns until it spends an action point to put it out. So you can cast this with one action point, use another action point to add burning, cast the spell, and then if you wanted to cast it a second time and use your fourth action to wash out the disadvantage, you could do so, and you would deal an extra point of damage with the passive because they are already burning. Now when we come over and look at the 5th edition version, you see it's evocation cantrip, one action, a range of 120 feet. The components, verbal somatic, duration, instantaneous, very similar there in a lot of ways. The range is noteworthy that it is considerably longer. You hurl a mode of fire at a creature or object within range. Make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, the target takes a D10 fire damage. A flammable object hit by the spell ignites if it isn't being worn or carried. And then the damage increases as you reach 5th level, 11th level, 17th level. So it is a good spell in 5th edition. It deals a decent amount of damage. The range is 70 feet longer than the DC20 equivalent. Although you can spend an extra action, coming back over to the DC20 version, to increase the range by 25 feet. So if you spent enough actions, you could get this firebolt to reach the same range as a 5th edition firebolt. And you might say, well, that's taking extra actions more than you would need for 5th edition, where you can, for one action, make a longer spell attack. But the difference here is you have 4 actions in DC20. So you can get an equivalent 5th edition firebolt just by spending the extra actions to increase the range if you needed to. But if you don't need to enhance the range, which, how often are you casting a firebolt at 120 feet anyway, you can then spend those extra actions on other things. So the actions are just not equivalent when you factor in the entirety of the action economy in DC20 versus 5th edition. So this refocus is going to go a little bit longer, but I'm going to go into Bless now. So this is the DC20 version of Bless. As you see, it is a divination. It costs 2 action points and 1 magic point. So at first level, characters are going to have 6 magic points. So essentially you could cast Bless 6 times if you did nothing else. Also noteworthy in DC20 is that you can only spend 1 magic point on a spell at first level. At 3rd level, you could spend up to 2 magic points on a spell. So currently we would be capped at just casting Bless, and even though at the bottom you see mana point enhancements, we would not be capable of using those enhancements until 3rd level for targets and 5th level for Grace. I'm going to talk more about those in a minute. Let's just go through the basics of the spell. The range is 5 spaces, so 5th edition equivalent, 25 feet. Duration 1 minute concentration. It is noteworthy that the rounds in DC20, the turns, are longer in the sense that they're 6 seconds in 5th edition, and in DC20 they're 12 seconds. So that means that the duration of a minute is actually half the duration of a 5th edition spell in the comparison of turns, because you would get 10 turns in 5th edition, 5 turns in DC20. You make a spell check, and yes, that's correct. For a buffing spell, you make a spell check, DC10. So you roll a D20, 20-sided die, add 4, that's your spellcasting modifier, and you're trying to hit a DC10. On a success, you bless up to 3 creatures of your choice within range. For each success above 10 above the DC, so if you hit 20 or 30, each one of those milestones adds an additional creature that you can bless. And if you fail this spell check, then you only bless 2 creatures. And Very similarly to 5th edition, whenever a target makes a check or save before the spell ends, the target can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to the total. So it's very similar to the 5th edition Bless. And in fact, before I go over the mana point enhancements, let's take a look at the 5th edition Bless. It's a first level enchantment spell, casting time 1 action, range 30 feet, components verbal, somatic, and material. It is concentration up to a minute. Again, looks very similar. The range is 5 feet more than in DC20. You bless up to 3 creatures of your choice within range. Whenever a target makes an attack roll or saving throw before the spell ends, they can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to the attack roll or saving throw. So as long as you make your spell check in DC20, you will have the same result as this bless. But what's really cool with the spell casting in DC20 is it's dynamic. So you make that spell check even though it's a buff, and you have the chance of it coming off worse, but that's cool that you have that, like, chance for something dynamic to happen versus this 5th edition version where you're like, yep, I cast Bless. You. And in DC20, you're making that spell check, and hey, if you got a 20 on your spell check, you're getting 4 people. And then all of a sudden that Bless is even better than the 5th edition version. Although casting it with a 2nd level or higher spell slot does allow you to add 1 additional target. And from the DC20 end of things, you're able to potentially get that extra target without even spending more resources. But again, at level 3, when you're able to spend 2 mana points on a spell, you could spend 2 actions and 1 mana point to cast the spell, and then spend a 2nd mana point on that first mana point enhancement targets, and then increase the number of targets by 1. And when you think about that, if you were to get a 20 now, you could be blessing up to 5 creatures. And then when you look at Grace, you can spend 2 mana points to change the d4s into d6s. So what this lets you do is just scale Bless to where... Bless is always relevant in 5th edition, but this scales it to a point where, like, it will be relevant and worth spending 3 mana points on in the future as well. And by the time you are capable of spending 3 mana points on a spell, which would be the equivalent of casting a 3rd level spell in 5th edition, being able to enhance Bless to a point that it's on par with 3rd level spells is really cool. Again, not to say that Bless in 5th edition is ever irrelevant, because adding a d4 to saving throws and attack rolls is good, but this lets you take what was already good and continue to make it great. Also to note that it's cool how spells in DC20 can have a 1st level version, we'll say, in the case of Bless, but then through mana point enhancements, that same spell can grow. Misty Step, I don't have it pulled up, is another good example where it's 1 mana point and you make a spell check. The DC on that's high, it's 20, but you're essentially getting Misty Step as a 1st level spell. And if you fail, you only go 15 feet, 3 squares. But if you succeed, you go the full 5 squares, or 25 feet. So again, it is 5 feet less than the 5th edition Misty Step, but still pretty good. And the fact that even on a fail, you're getting a 15-foot teleport for a mana point is pretty good. But there's a mana point enhancement for Far Step, where you essentially increase the amount of spaces that you teleport by 3. So you're pretty much getting like that higher level teleport in 5th edition by just adding extra mana to the original spell. So anyway, that's the basics of spellcasting for DC20, looking at a couple classic iconic spells. I have kind of gone over, but I do feel refocused now, and I'm ready to tackle my next encounter, which I believe is finishing an order. So I hope you have a great day, and I'll catch up with you later. Bye. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the content that you just saw, consider joining one of our games at startplaying.gaming/rollwithusdms.